couple of weeks ago, we had fun when two of our dear friends from the church in Las Vegas, where Debbie and I served for 13 years, came and spent a few days with us. It was, I hope it was refreshing for them. It was a great blessing for us. They're just, I mean, they're very grace filled and grace transmitting people. So that made it it made it not hard at all. Uh, I've already shared with you that neither Debbie nor I have what I consider the gift of hospitality, but being able to open our home to them and just hang out together, it just felt great. Um, I don't think we're wired to just have people in and out all the time, but it was just a good reminder. Having friends, having people that we care about here, and loving on them and interacting with them, and I mean, it's not like, well, I can enrich you. That's not. I can't. But somehow, when we are together and that interaction happens, there's enrichment, and I'm so grateful to God for that. I Gaius in Third John here, this third letter from the Apostle John. I wonder if he was a little bit like us, in that his. Although, no, wait, I should back up. I think he may have had more of a gift of hospitality than I do. Really, almost anybody has more of a gift of hospitality than I do. But here we have to kind of connect dots to figure out what had happened, because John he doesn't describe the events. He just talks in terms of they're in the past, they're history. So evidently, some people from John's physical location at the time, whichever church, traveled and stopped at wherever Gaius was, and Gaius showed them hospitality. To what degree and for how long? Can't say. We don't know. It's okay to kind of project into that and draw some of our own conclusions about what it might have been. I don't think it was like months and months, but it was more than a couple of days. We don't even know why these people had gone and why they ended up in Gaius's town and in his home. I'm pretty sure it was not leisure travel. I'm not sure that it was business travel in the sense that they went and carried on business for profit. The impression I got was that they were on some kind of a mission as itinerant or traveling preachers, teachers, representatives of Christ and the church. Now, I can't prove that. It's just an idea. And whether they were or not, honestly, doesn't affect the story one way or the other. I mean, they so, but the thing to me that just jumps out is when they got back, they gave testimony. They talked about, and there's a chance that this testimony was given in the context of the meeting of the church. It could have been that they had such a great time and they talked about it, and their friends heard them talk about it. John heard them talk about it. But there's a possibility that they just stood up in their assembly, the gathering of the church, and said, "We had such a blessing from God. Let us tell you about this guy named Gaius. Well, John writes in verse 6, they have told the church about your love. I think that's one of the reasons I think it was at the assembly. Please send them on their way in a manner that honors God. Okay, now there's a couple of things. And again, we're trying to connect dots. John is talking about something in the past and something in the present. In the past, evidently, these people sometime in the past had encountered Gaius, benefited from his hospitality, got home, and shared with the church the blessing that Gaius had been. And in the present, it's possible that they were current as in the current time as John wrote this letter to Gaius. They had somehow come back to Gaius and were guests again of the hospitality of his home. That to me, it's the only way that it makes sense that they have told the church about his love, and then John follows immediately saying, please send them on their way in a manner that honors God. Well, I want us to think a little bit about how do we ever send anyone on their way in a manner that honors God? And I know I'm making a lot out of this. It's worth making a good bit out of, because our world is not the same as the world that John and Gaius and these brothers and sisters, whomever they were, lived in. In ancient times, especially in the Middle East, and I'm told it's still that way today, to be invited into someone's home and to enjoy the hospitality of their home is among the highest of honors. And yet, here's the other side of that. It is a common honor. It's one of those things you're generally expected to show hospitality to people. That's part of the Middle Eastern culture. Even today, it's part of the deal. I don't think that Western culture, American culture, is anti this, but we're not quite as eager, I would say, to invite people into our homes. I'm not even saying that's a sin. I'm just saying our culture is not the same as their culture, even today, but certainly back in John's day and Gaius's day. Gaius I don't think he was an exception, but I think what he did was he expressed his love for Christ, his love of God, by expressing his love of people, his honor of them, his desire to serve them, and hosted them. It's possible for an extended period of time. And I think, as I've said, that's entirely possible. This was at least the second visit. And so, how do you send somebody on their way in a manner that honors God? Okay, there's two pieces. Send somebody on their way, and then the second piece, in a manner that honors God. But let's start with the second piece. What's a manner that honors God? Well, you can make a pretty quick catalog of attitudes and behaviors that honor God. I think first on my list would be authenticity. I want to be what years ago, you have to be old to remember when computers ran strictly on DOS, not Windows, I've talked about this before. I used to use Word Perfect, and you would create a document in Word Perfect, but it didn't look on the screen like it was going to look when it came off the printer. And then Windows came on the scene, and the terminology was, your screen is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. That's the kind of person I want to be. I think that's the kind of person Gaius was. I think if you send someone on their way in a manner that honors God, this authenticity, honesty is going to be at the top. Second, I think generosity. Now, I don't know. John doesn't say, oh, and by the way, you need to load their pockets with silver or coinage, or, load them down with all kinds of stuff before you send them out. I don't know, but I think, to me, it's just so strongly implied that Gaius's hospitality was an extension of his generosity, or his generosity was an extension of his hospitality, whichever way. But this generosity thing, this is a thing that I think American Christians would do well to discipline themselves toward greater generosity. Even in a time like now when there's a lot of economic uncertainty, that doesn't release me or you from it's a need that we have to be generous. And I think it may be more important, my need to give may be more important than their need to receive. Okay, so authenticity and generosity. I think prayerfulness is another. I can't explain this, but there are times when I just feel awkward saying, hey, let's pray together. That's just silly. Of all things that a guy like me ought to find natural is, hey, let's pray together. But I think if you're going to send them on their way in a manner that honors God, I think prayerfulness is one of them. And being able to pray for their good and ask God for his blessing and generosity toward them. Good prayers. When people pray with me as I leave, aside from the fact that God hears and answers those prayers, there's a feeling in me that's very positive to know and hear that somebody is praying for my benefit and my best interest. Is, golly, that just kind of puts oxygen back in my soul. So, okay, authenticity, generosity, prayerfulness. The only way I can think of that I could send somebody on in a manner that honors God is to think about things that are consistent with God's nature. Doing and reflecting those things would be consistent. Those would be things that would honor God, a manner that would honor God. Just let's close it off here and let me ask, would there be a difference in our lives if our daily goal, our daily objective was to do everything that we're doing in a manner that honors God? I'd change my life. Number one, I would have to engage more intentionally, right? Because I don't just accidentally do things and say things that honor God. I have to intentionally do that. And the outcome, I believe, is in the long run, the outcome is when I do things that honor God, He gets glory. Almost nothing should give us a greater fulfillment than knowing that we have done and said things to honor Him and raise His. You can't raise His value. He doesn't need you to raise His value. But when we give Him glory, it expands our soul. Well, okay. We'll move on next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.